Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Julie Mann, and I help men and women live healthy, happy, sustainable lives. And today I'm talking to Hazel Pananche. Hi, Hazel.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
Oh, good, thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Pleasure. So for those of you that haven't yet met Hazel, she does so many different things. So she is a Certified Master Clinical Hypnotherapist, a business and life mentor. She does NLP and also stress management counseling. So lots and lots of things. But before we start talking about all of that, Hazel, I noticed on your website that you've got a quote that says, "I come from a drama-driven, high dysfunctional background." Yeah, can you expand on that?
I do come from that kind of background. My father was a rageaholic and a compulsive gambler. And my mother was definitely, although I didn't know it at the time, a battered wife. And I heard nothing except shouting and screaming in my family from the time I was very young. And in my estimation, as a child, I thought I had to be perfect. Otherwise, I wouldn't be okay with them. So I consider that to be very drama driven.
Totally. So how did you, apart from trying to be perfect, which obviously you can't really measure up to that because there's no such thing, is there? How did you cope with being around that energy?
Well, I didn't know that there was anything different at the time. I was young. So until I got really into my teen years, late teen years, and started sort of seeing other families and how they were. In fact, we had a next door neighbor, and when I used to go in to play with their kids, it was very different. It was very quiet and it was peaceful. And I didn't know at the time whether my family was the one that was normal or their family. So it didn't really, at that time, I didn't perceive it as being different. It was what it was. And that's as far as I can remember. I am not in that place anymore. And it's many, many chapters ago. So it wasn't a comfortable upbringing. It definitely wasn't. And I would hope for every child today that they don't go through that kind of an upbringing. Unfortunately, I know that many do.
Yes. I know that you've had a really varied career, haven't you, Hazel? So tell us about some of the jobs you've had.
Well, in England, going way back, I left school when I was 17. My father, who was a very strict, I don't know what you call them today, but he was very strict, and girls didn't go to college. I was there to procreate. So in his mind, I was going to stay home and he was going to give me an allowance. In my mind, no way, I was going to get a job. And so that's what I did first. I got a job, and it's funny, I can still remember, I can still see it actually. It was in the West End of London in a mannequin making company where they used to make the mannequins, like the ones that you see in shop windows, all dressed up. And I had taken, I had gone to college of sorts. I went to Pitman's, which was a secretarial college. So I was a very fast typist and I took good shorthand and I had a great job. But showing you how my father was, we used to go to the south of France for a month every year. I had a job and I only had 2 weeks holiday. And he said, "Don't worry, you'll come back after 2 weeks." Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen. He wouldn't let me. So I lost the job. And so from there, I went on to work in advertising, also in the West End of London. And I loved that job. I met my then husband and continued working. And together we opened a restaurant. Now, I was only 19 at this time, and we got engaged. And when I was 20, we got married. So from then on, I really became the wife, the mother, and the daughter. And I completely lost myself. I was who they thought I should be, not who I wanted to be. So we had the restaurant, and I would work in the evenings there initially, and I would have my day job, which was in advertising. But that didn't last very long, because after we'd been married about 3 months, I got pregnant. So I used to work in the restaurant until I had my son, and then I never worked. Over the ensuing years, I only worked when I really wanted to escape the marriage, I guess you could call it, which is terrible when I think back. And I was always very good, apparently, at sales, although I didn't know it. So I would get jobs here and there in sales. And the first actual job I had after I got married, my husband and I had, in partnership with somebody else, a large eyelash manufacturing company called Cardinelli Beauty Products. And they wanted to send out a team of women on the road. At the time, only men went out doing sales calls. And I said to them, never having done this before, and I guess that's where I first found that I had that soupçon of courage. And I said, let me go out first, because men can't wear eyelashes, women can. And so I went out with them saying, don't worry, we don't expect you to come back with anything. It's, your first time, but don't worry about it. Just go out and have the experience, basically. Well, out I went, and that first day I signed up 5 of the biggest stores in London. And so I went home from there, and I did that for about, 6 or 9 months. It must have been. I actually don't remember completely. And then we took on a female sales team. And then I went back to doing what I normally do. I was bringing up children. I was a housewife, because that's what we called them back then. And I was still a daughter, still living under the, I don't know what to call it, but under the cloud, I guess that's how I would describe it today, of having my parents around who were highly dysfunctional. And then in 1974, we had closed our restaurant by that time, obviously. And in 1974, my husband decided that we would be better off living in Vancouver, Canada. He had an uncle there who claimed us. And I had never been away from everybody before. We had a huge family, huge, tribe of friends. And so off we went to Vancouver. And I was there. I was so miserable that first year. I hated it. My daughter didn't like it. My son walked around. He was 15, and he was 2 years ahead of them in school. So his friends became 17-year-olds. And at the end of the first year, I was really, really miserable. Michael was making a lot of money, but I was miserable. And he finally said to me, if you're so miserable, we'll go back to London. So that's what we did. We turned around, we went back to London. I went first, I got the kids in school, I rented a house, and he came back about a month later. Unfortunately, he didn't like it anymore. And so our furniture hadn't even arrived at the docks in London and we went back. So we had to turn everything around and go back to Vancouver again. And unfortunately, in the second year, because he missed a lot of his exams that he needed to take for his business, everything fell apart. So ultimately, we came back to London in 1976, and he started all over again. He was never one to not work. So he started in partnership with a partner. He had a partner, completely different business. He became what we call here a public loss adjuster, what you call in London an assessor. So in other words, if you had a loss, he worked for you against the insurance company. And so we went from there.
Wow. I mean, I know that you moved about 6 times, didn't you? But
yes,
looking back at those experiences, Hazel, what can you say in hindsight that you learned from all that?
Well, number one, what I learned was don't take your children away from family when they're that age. My kids, when we first went to Vancouver, were 8 and 12. And the second time we went, they were, I think, 10 and 15. So, and they knew no one in Vancouver. And we had a large family. So if I could do it all over, I would never do that. It's not a great thing to do. And our kids said to us at one time when we were living here in Los Angeles, where we came in 1979, you never asked us what we wanted to do. We never asked them because that wasn't something we'd learned.
No. Well,
the truth is, parents made the decisions.
Yes, absolutely. So of all the things that you've experienced then, Hazel, what would you say is the hardest thing you've ever had to face, and how did you deal with it?
The hardest thing I ever had to face was coming to America in 1979. We lived here that wasn't the hardest. That was something that we both decided to do. And I have to say, in looking back, it was probably a mistake, but there you are, that's where we were. The hardest thing I ever did, and I was brought up in fear, as you can imagine. In that kind of background, you're afraid of everything. And my mother used to say, don't do that, you'll get hurt. Don't do that, you'll get hurt. Or my father would say, don't do that, it's the wrong thing to do. And so what do you learn? You learn how to be afraid of everything. But after we'd been here, I think it was 1984, I decided that I really couldn't stay in this marriage anymore, because as much as I cared for Michael, I was dying alive. I had to know who I was. So we got divorced. Now it terrified me. We'd only been in this country about 5 years. I really didn't know that many people, although I had some close friends. And I just wanted out. So truthfully, what I did, and I do not suggest anybody does this, what I did was I went to an attorney. He told me to change the locks on the door of the house, not to leave the home, because if I left, I would lose the home. And when he came home that night, he couldn't get in. I never discussed the divorce with him beforehand. I knew that if I didn't just do it, I would never do it. And so that was really the hardest thing I ever did, other than knowing that, we'd made other mistakes. They were mistakes. That was terrifying to me. It was more terrifying than starting a business at 50. It was more terrifying than anything. I'd never, ever lived alone. I'd gone from my parents' house to a husband's house. And that's what it was. It was my husband's home. It was our home, but it was his house, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So consequently, to do that, it was really, really scary. But I did it, and he didn't want the divorce. But I knew, having already been in marriage counseling, that it was never going to work and that we needed to split up. Now, I had known him since I was 14. So I really did know him. By the time he passed 2 years ago, I'd known him 64 years.
Wow.
And we stayed friends. Or if this is something you are, I'm going to say this because I think it's so important. If this is something that you can do with a partner that you have divorced or separated from, even if you can't be best friends, even if somebody cheated on you, do your best to be courteous with each other. Because I knew we had 2 children. At some point, they were going to get married and they were going to have kids. And I didn't want to be the grandparent that had to say, is dad coming? Because if he's coming, I can't come. So I really worked at staying friends. And we did stay friends. We stayed friends all through his second marriage that he got divorced from. And we stayed friends right up until the day he died. In fact, the last few years, I was his caretaker. So if you can do that with somebody, pardon?
That's really quite amazing, Hazel, that that you
well, it's about, I think you have to forgive yourself for the mistakes you made, and then you have to forgive the fact, and remember, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you.
Absolutely.
And I know that sounds weird to, yeah, right. But it sounds very weird to some people to say, when you forgive someone, you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for yourself. But if you can learn how to forgive someone, never mind what they've done, except, of course, if you've been battered badly, you don't want to be anywhere around them. I'm not suggesting that, or sexually abused. That, of course, is different. But if it's regular, I don't want to be married, he cheated on me or she cheated on me, then do your best to let it go and forgive.
Absolutely.
So that you can move forward.
Yeah.
With.
Yes, because that
holding on to.
So
that's what I did.
Yeah, holding on to that blame just hurts us, doesn't it? And really, by forgiving someone, it doesn't mean that we condone what happened. It just means that we're able to release that so that we can start to live differently. So I know that it wasn't until 1997 that you actually heard about coaching, and then you retrained and got the skills that you've got now. What made you start your own business?
Right, but I started my own business in 1990. When I got divorced, after about the first year, because the first 9 years after I got divorced, I was having fun, but it was a disaster financially. I'd never had to look after finances. It wasn't something I did. Wives didn't do that. The husbands did. So I realized at some point that if I didn't get a job, then I was not going to have a roof over my head, because I wasn't getting millions of dollars a month spousal support like some people do. At the time I was getting, when I think back, a ridiculously low amount. So I got a job in a psychologist's office, running the office. And after I'd been there about 6, I loved the job. I loved talking to the clients. I'd always been the type of person who people came to with their problems. And after about 6 months, I thought to myself, do I really want to stay in a job for the rest of my life? No, I want to run my own business. So what I did was, in order to avoid having to go back to school for 4 years and get my marriage family counseling license, I went to school for 1 year at night, and I got my hypnotherapy certification. So I became a master clinical hypnotherapist and an NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming, for those that may not know. And after I had been on, they invited me to be on staff at the Institute. I stayed there for about 3 months, and I was very fortunate. I had one client who was in the entertainment industry. And about 6 months after I was on staff, I was invited by a local psychologist to have an office in his practice. And I thought to myself, well, that's it. That was the next courageous thing I actually did, was moving away from having support and going into business for myself. She came with me, that one client in the entertainment industry. She wasn't about to let me go. And because of her, within 60 days, I had a full practice. And that went on until 1994, when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I had a terrible car accident. Somebody jumped a red light and nearly killed me. So here I am. I've got 3 herniated discs in my neck. I've got fibromyalgia, and I'm working from 10 or 11 in the morning till 10 at night. And it became almost impossible because I was getting migraines every day. And in 1997, I heard about coaching. And coaching was something you did on the phone. So I looked into it, I retrained, and I got my coaching certification a year later. However, while I was training, I was also getting clients and closing my practice down at the same time. Because I was counseling people as well as doing hypnotherapy, you don't just walk away. If people are going through whatever they're going through, you have to finish with them. So by 2000, I actually had my own coaching business. And at the time, it was called, if I remember correctly, Mind Mastery Coaching, which was Mind Mastery. Didn't stay that name, but that's where I started. And so I went from there. I became a coach. I always used hypnosis with clients that would allow it, that weren't afraid. So I did hypnosis on the phone with them. And most clients, although I'd often in my practice worked more with men than I did with women, in coaching, I worked more with women than I did with men. And what I found was they would come to me because they couldn't build their businesses. And in talking to them, I would find that it was about the way they were thinking. They were doing the typical female, and it is unfortunately very female, this trait. What if I can't? What if this happens? What if that happens? And so I would do hypnosis with them, and they would go on to create successful businesses. Amazing. And so I became, in essence, I became a business coach, because I would teach them how to build a business from the ground up, and I would teach them how to change the way they were thinking at the same time.
Brilliant. You talked about women that you work with in your coaching practice mostly. Is it just women you work with, and what kinds of people come, and typically what are they dealing with?
Mainly I was working, and I still do, mainly with women entrepreneurs. It's not that I turn men away. It's just that, when you learn about marketing, you also learn you have to have a target market. If I didn't hear it once, no, you can't work with everybody. Everybody, meaning that's not going to help you in business. Now, so what was my target market? I was over 40. So I decided that since it seemed to be that women over 40, they were the ones that seemed to start having issues with being confident with themselves about life and business. So I worked primarily from then with women over 40 who needed to let go of fear and doubt, have more confidence, decrease stress and anxiety. And by the way, I had had panic disorder for 20 years and didn't know how to get rid of it. Doctors kept telling me it was in my head. It was, but not in the way they meant. And a few sessions of hypnosis, I never had panic attacks again. So for anybody that's having panic attacks, you can get rid of it. It doesn't have to be there and spoil your whole life.
Absolutely.
So,
in fact, actually, Hazel, I went to see a hypnotherapist because when I was pregnant with my daughter Katie, I experienced, it was actually hormones, but I experienced what I labeled panic attacks. And of course, they became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I ended up going to see a hypnotherapist. So I totally concur with that. Absolutely. You don't have to be stuck with that. So if someone's watching, if there's somebody watching, male or female, who right now is really struggling, what advice would you give them?
Number one, take a step back from the struggle. And number two, before you do anything else, decide what it is that you really, really want to do. If you can decide what it is, because often what happens is, well, I think I'll do this. Well, I'm good at this. Well, I'm good at that. And, and then you get completely overwhelmed because you've got all these different things that you could do, but which is one thing you really want to do that you're passionate about? I'm sure you've heard that saying, if you are passionate about what you do, you never work a day in your life. It's something like that.
Yes.
I'm quoting and misquoting because I don't remember the exact quote. However, that's basically what it is. And so if you take a step back and you take some breaths, even if you take a day off of worrying about what you're going to do, and then come back and say, okay, I always have clients when they're in these places. It's almost like doing relationship counseling. I have them write a list of pros and cons. So take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and think about what it is you really would like to do, and then write down all the pros, and then write down all the cons, and see which list is bigger for you. 9 times out of 10, if you've chosen the right thing, you'll find that it's all the positives that are way bigger than the negatives. And if that's something that you really think you would like to do, then you need to decide not how you're going to get there, but where it is you want to go. Because if you don't know where you want to go, it's like me giving you a map to somewhere. Well, no, actually, it's like me giving you an address and saying, here, go here, with no driving instructions. So this is where people fall down. They don't know where they want to go. So consequently, they dither and make mistakes, and they go into that, oh my God, I can't do this. Oh my God, what if this happens? And now we're in anticipatory anxiety before we've even started. So if you can do that, what is it I want to do? Where is it I want to go? Then you can go to, how will I get there? And 9 times out of 10, if you can afford it, like I did, even though I am a coach and have been for nearly 30 years, I still have a coach. I may not speak to her every week like I used to, but I still have a coach. Because I know that it's important for me to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody that's been there before me. And so I always had a coach. And if you can afford to do it, find a coach or have a mentor, somebody that you look up to, somebody, maybe it's a friend that is non-judgmental that you can brainstorm with, but somebody, and then sit down and write out a 1-page business plan. If you are not looking to get a bank loan, which means that you would need pages of a business plan, you can get a business plan written in 1 page. And if anyone really wants a 1-page business plan, I have one that you can have for free. All you have to do is email me, and I'll give you that information at the end. And so that's really what I suggest for people to do. If you do that and you stay focused, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, do not go into the shiny bauble syndrome, which means that you start one thing and then you think of something else you want to do and you go off and do that. And then you think of something else. And now you have 3 things half started, but nothing finished. Do one thing at a time and finish it, and then go on to the second thing. That's how you become successful.
Such great advice, Hazel. Thank you. And I will be putting all your links below this video so people will be able to get hold of you and receive that business plan. Fantastic. I know you've written a best-selling book, haven't you, called The Astonishing Power of You, which is such an amazing title. What made you do that? And what was the process like of writing it?
I had never written a thing in my life. I mean, when I wrote, this was I was already 65 when I wrote that book. And I'd been in business since I became a coach. I became a hypnotherapist when I was 50, became a coach when I was about 57. Now I was 65. And yes, I had sales pages written for me, but I really didn't know how to write. So I was working with someone at the time who was a friend and a coach. And she said to me, you need to write a book. And I said, really, I can't write a book. I've never written anything in my life. That was the immediate thing that I went to, even with all the knowledge I had, was I can't write a book. I've never written one. And she said to me, yes, you can. You do it one step at a time. Just what I just told you. Only I didn't know that back then. And so I wrote my book. It was a very interesting process. It took about 6 or 7 months. I did 1 chapter at a time. I got incredible testimonials from very big people. And the book actually, when I was 67, I think I was 66 or 67, it went on Amazon and it became an Amazon #1 bestseller. However, since that time, I've actually taken it down. Back then, you couldn't do print on demand. You had to have a publishing company that published a book, which meant that you had to buy 50 or 100 at a time. You couldn't do it any other way, and you had to send them out. So I finally took it off the market, although I discovered one day that somebody was offering that book for sale for $150. I'm sure they never sold it because I never heard from anybody. And I took it off the market in about 2000 or 2001. And I'm in the process actually of finding out how I can refurbish the book, add a little to it, and get it printed again the way we have things printed today. It was a very interesting experience. And all I can say to you is never, ever say, I can't, because anything is possible for you to be able to do. All you need is a cheerleader, because that's what she was. She was definitely not just my coach and my friend, she was my cheerleader. So, and that's how I got it done. It was very interesting. I wrote one chapter at a time so that I didn't get overwhelmed. And it was really from, today, if I was writing that book, I would probably enhance it and put more into it than I did back then. I didn't want something that was 1,000 pages long that somebody would go and read and halfway through would say, oh, I can't be bothered with this anymore. Trust me, I have books on my shelf that I've never even read right the way through because they're too big. So I didn't do that with this book. And since then, I've co-authored in many other best-selling books by invitation and written chapters. So it's been a very interesting experience. Obviously, I learned how to write to some degree, but
Amazing. And I look forward to hearing that you've updated that book, Hazel. And you're right. I mean, we all need a cheerleader, don't we? That's so, so important. What would you really like people to know about you, Hazel?
That if you work with me, I am very loving, very kind, and very non-judgmental. However, if you work with me and you want to hear whatever you want to hear, I'm the wrong person to work with. I can only help you if you're willing to hear what you need to do. Whether it's changing the way you think, whether it's building a business, whatever it is. I can't help you if you come to me. I had a client many years ago, and I'm going to tell you this as an experience. I'm very much law of attraction. And I don't know how it works. I just know it does. So I would teach people about the law of attraction. What you think is what you get. So if you continually think negatively, that's what you're going to attract. If you think positively and you take action, that's what you will attract. But many years ago, I had a client, he was actually a male client. And I couldn't understand it because we would speak every week and he wasn't doing anything. And finally, after 2 months, I said to him, I don't understand. You're not doing anything. You're not taking any action. What's going on? And he said, well, you told me that law of attraction works. If I put it out to the universe, it'll come back. I said, yes, but you have to take action. It doesn't just happen. And he thought that that's what it meant. Obviously, it was, I didn't make it clear enough, or he didn't understand well enough. And I had to let him go because it was no good working with him. So I let him go with love, and I don't know what he went on to do. And I still have a client who worked with me 25 years ago and found me on Facebook and contacted me, a male client, and wanted to come back. And so I've been seeing him too, but I primarily work with women. I am going to be, I hate to say this because it's like I'm talking about somebody else. I'm going to be 80 next week. So when I think of it, what kind of experience and wisdom can I impart to people? A lot. Considering that I started this journey when I was 45 or 50, and I continue to grow every day, I learn something new. So I teach my clients the same way, basically, that I was taught. Be loving, be kind, be non-judgmental, and I really don't tell you exactly what to do. I ask you what it is that you think you should be doing at that particular, whatever it is. I can always give you the answer, but what happens if I give you the answers to everything and I'm not there anymore? You won't know what to do. So I help you to find your own path. I generally use hypnosis with people, and trust me, it's really not something to be scared of. You are not out of control. I'm not going to make you quack like a duck or, do a sheep or anything. This is clinical hypnotherapy, which means it's to help you. And all I'm going to do is give you suggestions based on whatever it is you tell me you want. And that's really all I can tell you about me.
Fantastic.
I can't, I have children, I have grandchildren. What else can I tell? Oh, and by the way, I worked with my grandchildren under hypnosis because 2 of them have ADHD. So it does work for ADHD too.
Amazing.
So,
Actually,
I'm sorry.
Delay, sorry, Hazel. But my experience of hypnosis is it's just lovely. It's relaxing. It's just very nourishing indeed. It's just like listening to a meditation. So I would absolutely highly recommend it. You've had such an amazing life, Hazel. You've had to overcome extraordinary things. And for some people watching, they'll be thinking, wow, was it really like that back then? Oh my goodness, because things have changed so much. And even though you talked about having fear as a child, you obviously had heaps of courage and determination, which is how come you are who you are today and you do the things that you do. So of all the things that you've done in your life, Hazel, what would you say you are most proud of?
Well, I'm going to say the obvious. I'm proud of my children. I'm proud that I had 2 wonderful kids. But I'm also proud of the fact that even through all the fear, and I did have tremendous amounts of fear, even through all the fear, I didn't allow it to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. I walked through that fear instead of having it be a wall that stopped me. And I'm really proud of what I've done and where I've come to, especially starting a business at 51 years old when I'd never been in business in my life before. I had no idea what business was like. And it took me a long time to understand the methods of business that you need to know, actually, to be successful. But I'm very proud of where I've come. I continue to grow every day. You never stop growing. You never stop learning, not until the day you die. And I don't intend to die until I'm at least 101.
I love that. So another 21 years to go. How fantastic. When you're no longer on this planet, maybe when you get to 102, who knows, what would you like people to say about you?
Oh, I think it's such a difficult thing. I don't use the word difficult, sorry. And that's something you can do when you're talking. Be careful, be conscious of the words you use. I don't use the word difficult anymore. I use the word challenging, because difficult really connotates something really negative. Challenging, yes, it's similar, but it's not quite the same. I find that question so challenging. I don't know what I would really like people to say about me. I don't have any regrets. I would like people to know that I made a difference to a lot of people, hundreds of people over the years, that I'm loving and kind and very generous. I do like to give back, so I will often do, or have done in the past, pro bono sessions to people that can't afford it. I worked for various charities so that I can, especially I worked for the Family Violence Project here for a couple of years because as a volunteer. And I'd like people to know that just because I have an English accent, because believe it or not, Julie, this is something that people think. that because I have an English accent, I have better education than them, I have more class than them, I have this, I have that, and I still have people coming up to me saying, please say something. And and I want you to know, it doesn't matter that I come from England, that I'm a Londoner, that I haven't lost my accent. And truthfully, if you want to be totally transparent, I don't lose my accent purposely because people listen to it. But that's really what I would want people to know at the end of my life, that I made a difference in the world. To however many people it made a difference. I have testimonials that could tell you this, and that I believe in forgiveness. I've made many mistakes, but I've moved past them and changed things, changed the way I think, and that I'm loving, kind, and generous. I can't think of anything else.
Well, I mean, you certainly rose to that challenge, didn't you, Hazel? That's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. So for anyone who's curious about Hazel, please check out the links and get in touch with her. So all there is for me to say is thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute delight.